Hello, everybody. I am Geoff Arbuckle, co-host of the Film Seizure podcast. I'm also the host of Monster Mondays and Film Seizure at the Movies that you can find here at filmseizure.com or at the other various places that you can listen to our show and the various podcast providers. I absolutely positively love the Monkees, and one of the things that we had kind of thought about over the last couple of weeks, and something that we kind of finally decided to do, that even though we're taking the summer off and we will be returning in September, we thought, well, instead of having completely and totally empty weeks outside of the Monster Monday stuff that we're doing, let's re-release some of our favorite episodes or some of our favorite conversations and bring them back to people who may be a little bit newer and don't have the time to go searching through 226 episodes to find something that they might like. So we want to kind of serve up some of these to say, these are some of our favorite conversations. They might be some of your favorite episodes too, and it may not be a movie that you would necessarily think about watching or think about ever listening to two or three guys talk about. So we're going to start doing this on a weekly basis instead of doing new episodes while we're on our vacation. We are going to kind of release some of these best of episodes, and this may be something that continues on beyond even after we come back, because there may be weeks in which we skip a week before we do an episode or something like that. So we may throw in a best of episode in there as well. But and I picked episode number 40, 1968's Head, to be this first episode this first best of episode, because like I said, I love the Monkees. I grew up on them. They're a real nostalgia trip for me. I still love listening to them. I still feel good when I listen to them. And I think that that's something that nostalgia and those sentimental moments in your life should make you feel, and they should make you feel good. So for our first best of episode, hang tight for the next hour and a half or so and listen to us listen to Jason and I should say, talk about 1968's Head. We talked about it right around its 50th anniversary. In the meantime, like I said, Film Seizure will be back with new episodes in September. It'll either be the very beginning of September or no later than midway through September, but we'll be back in September. Like I also said, there's going to be some slightly different ideas that we have that we're excited to do as far as more like theme episodes or things that may not just be a single movie or a single concept that we're talking about. So look forward to that. However, the one show that isn't on break is Monster Mondays. You can listen to my Monster Monday show every single Monday afternoon. This upcoming Monday, I will be talking about an interesting little Japanese monster movie called Yokai Monsters 100 Monsters. You can listen to that on Monday, starting Monday, June 27th. And then next month, I'll be talking about some TV shows with monsters and stuff. That should be pretty fun, too. Also, you may notice that I have some Film Seizure at the Movies episodes that I've been doing a lot more of lately. The next one of those should be out sometime probably around June 28th, maybe June 30th or so. And I'll have conversations around Lightyear, or my thoughts on Lightyear, Elvis, and Phil Tippett's Mad God that's now streaming on Shudder. So look forward to that. And until then, sit back, relax, enjoy this classic episode of Film Seizure, where Jason and I talk about the Monkees.
Clicks, clacks, right in the backs, giraffes, the laughs, all right for a while. Sings of castles and kings, the things that go with a life of style. Wanting to feel, to know what is real. Living is life.
Welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. I'm Geoff Arbuckle,
I'm Jason Oliver.
and we have something different this time around.
Yeah, a little different. I mean, we've delved into these waters a little bit before, but this is, I think, something entirely unique.
Yeah.
What is it? What is it, Jeff?
We are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Monkees' only feature film, Head. So okay. Let's back up to why I wanted to do this. I think a little bit of backstory will be could go a long way. I am a huge Monkees fan. I grew up on the stuff. As Jason can attest to, they were on TV a lot in our youth.
Absolutely. Yep.
They were a huge part of the mid 80s and MTV. And we'll get around to a little bit of a timeline with that, and then mix that in with the timeline of how I got to them, and then probably talk about how you got to them.
Yeah,
too.
definitely.
Now, another thing I wanted to talk about was simply the fact that, Jason, you are a music person. You're not just a movie person.
Yes. I love music.
Some people would call you a snob.
Yeah, probably.
And you probably wear that.
I probably deserve that. Yeah. I try, you know, it's like with movies these days. I tried to kind of dial that ship down because honestly, it's not really worth it. And nobody likes that guy who turns their nose up at what they like. You know, I've kind of, as I got older, evolved past that, I feel like. But still, it's uncomfortable when someone asks them, like, hey, who's your favorite band? And they say something like, I don't know, fucking Maroon 5 or something. That's hard for me, right? I have to kind of like nod my head. It's like, oh, cool. All right. You know?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, I definitely have specific taste in music, but across a lot of different genres.
Yes.
And across a lot of different eras.
However, I would say where you and I ultimately are a little more divided is through classic rock.
Yeah.
I grew up with older brothers, and they were all about the stuff that they were growing up with in the mid 60s and into the 70s and so forth. Like, you know, I certainly have appreciation for things that I know you don't like at all. And
I don't know. We'll dig into that. That might not be true.
No, I'm pretty sure that's true. I can think of two things right off the top of my head that I probably have a hell of a lot more appreciation for than you do.
Well, maybe appreciation is the wrong word. I mean, is it something that I would like? What are they? What are these two things?
The Eagles.
Oh, yeah, I don't like the Eagles.
And Aerosmith.
I'm okay with Aerosmith. I like early Aerosmith.
Okay.
Basically, everything up to like Love in an Elevator, I'm kind of on board with.
Oh, Pump's a good album, though.
Everything after
Janie's
that,
Got a Gun.
it's
okay.
all right. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pretty much 90s on.
I'm okay with the Aerosmith. Yeah.
All right.
The Aerosmith.
The Aerosmith.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, all right, fair enough. But definitely, we have different sensibilities as we approach classic rock or oldies.
Yeah.
Probably.
I think part of the problem too for me, a lot of my musical discovery came I don't know. A lot of it was on my own. I mean, it's kind of cliche. I'm sure a lot of you listening have this similar story, but it was like the Columbia House, tape, buy 12 or buy one, get 12 free or whatever. My dad got suckered into that, and he likes music, but he only likes a few bands. Like, he likes the bands from the 50s. He liked the old Beatles stuff. He didn't really like the Beatles when they start getting more counterculture and psychedelic.
Yeah.
He liked the Dave Clark 5. He liked
that sounds like my mom.
the Animals, you know?
Yeah, my mom was into the earlier Beatles, although she does like the later Beatles stuff too, not nearly as much. And that makes sense. I mean, because her formative years were the late 50s and early 60s.
Yeah.
You have a lot different appreciation for popular rock, lesser on the psychedelic and stuff.
But yeah, so I mean, through like Columbia House, I started to actually just based on kind of feel almost, or just things I'd heard in reference, pop culturally as how I discovered things like Led Zeppelin, The Doors, Pink Floyd. And my dad didn't listen to any of that stuff. And it wasn't necessarily because it was just because he didn't prefer it, right?
Right.
So that's how I kind of discovered all that. My dad did like the Beatles, and I kind of took that appreciation further on my own into some of the stuff that he didn't care for. But what's interesting is where the Beatles sort of stopped being for him, the Monkees kind of came in.
Right.
He fucking loved the Monkees, right? And because of that, I listened to the Monkees all the time when I was a kid. Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, I probably more like. Okay. Well, okay. I'll back. Let me back up from that.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We got a lot of ground to cover. So let's do a quick little timeline of the Monkees. Kind of talk about what they were meant to be. And
this is really
how we
important
led to our this week's movie.
One quick note here. I think this is really good. We're going to do this because when I think of the Monkees, I think there's a lot of conflicting, thoughts and rumor and things that people aren't sure about. Even me right now talking, I'm really excited to hear what Geoff's going to say, and I'm going to ask him questions because I'd always heard that the Monkees were like a manufactured boy band. They didn't really play their instruments. They didn't write any music. They were essentially props that were created to make a U.S. Beatles, right? Like their whole point was to compete with the Beatles in the United States. That's all of the stuff that I kind of had heard in various bits and pieces along the way. And I'm sure some of that has a grain of truth to it, and I'm sure a lot of it is bullshit.
It's more the other way around.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
but it's interesting. The evolution becomes very interesting.
Well, yeah. That I think was what I'm most fascinated with because you watch a movie like Head, and you're like, holy shit, man. This is a lot of creative freedom, and there's no maybe when the Monkees started, they were like, all right, we're gonna go up against the Beatles that you think of as the Fab Four, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas then all of a sudden the Beatles changed, and they were like, we don't know what to do with the Monkees. The Monkees need to now be countercultural. They need to be hippie. They need to be what, right? Psychedelic? Yeah.
Well, and certainly some of that, I think, comes into play. But I think some of that was also their own personal expressions starting to come out.
Which I think is exactly right, which I find fascinating as well. So take it away, Geoff.
All right. The idea of the show... so the Monkees were prefabricated. They were often called the Prefab Five. Or Prefab Four, rather. Sorry, I was thinking... Yeah, never mind.
Thinking of George. You're adding George in there.
Yeah, sure.
The other George, not Harrison.
Right.
Martin, right?
Yeah. So they were the Prefab Four. And I don't think they ever argued that moniker. I don't think they ever argued that that's not entirely accurate about them.
Yeah.
It was basically a culmination of Beatlemania and two guys in particular that had a lot to do with bringing them to the screen were Bob Rafelson, who would go by Robert Rafelson in a lot of these early things, but he ultimately became a very, very, very important kind of new Hollywood counterculture director, particularly teaming up with Jack Nicholson, which is also important for Head a little bit later. And he had a production company with Bert Schneider. It was called Raybert Productions, and they thought, let's have a show that is essentially like the Beatles if the Beatles were never popular. Basically, hard, kind of down on their luck, kind of missing out on opportunity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Naturally, I think there was already the vibe of it'll be family friendly. It'll be something that kids will like, especially teenagers and younger will really like. So what happened was they, around 65 or so, they put out the call for people to come and try out for for this group. And I don't remember exactly. And during my research, I didn't think of it until now to look up, but I think there were hundreds of people who responded to the casting call. And they settled on 4 guys who happened to be 2 actors, David Jones, who came from England, and Mickey Dolenz, who had a TV show when he was a kid in the 50s called Circus Boy. They actually make jokes about that in an episode where the Monkees are at a circus. And 2 musicians, Peter Tork, Peter Torkelson was actually his name. He was from the Washington, D.C. area. I think he probably migrated to Greenwich Village. He became really good friends with Stephen Stills.
Oh, huh.
So, he has a little bit of folk background and pedigree. And then from Dallas, or at least from Texas, I think it's Dallas, Michael Nesmith. Mike Nesmith was kind of new to music, but he could play bass. He was, and he had a pretty good voice, and he could write some songs. In fact, he wrote one of Linda Ronstadt's biggest songs, "Different Drum."
Huh.
From the 60s. It was like one of her first hits. And it's so so you have this kind of mix of people who are musically inclined and people who could act the parts that they were playing. Funny thing is, I was telling you this as we were watching a couple of episodes leading into this. They were assigned roles to play within the band. They were all somewhat musically inclined, but were assigned to different instruments than what they actually could play. Mickey could play guitar a little bit, but he was assigned the drummer. Davey could play guitar, but he was assigned the lead singer, or he could play drums and a little bit of guitar, but he was assigned the lead singer. Peter could play all sorts of different lead and rhythm guitars and banjo and all this, and he was assigned the bassist. And then Mike, who could play bass, was assigned the lead guitar. So it was, they were kind of mixed up, but the whole idea was that this is a fantasy we're selling.
Right.
This is a TV show about a band. This is not really meant to be a band. And it's really, really important to remember that.
But when they cut the music, I assume that wasn't them playing the instruments in the studio?
On the first 2 albums, no.
Okay.
Later albums, yes.
Okay.
Or at least to a certain extent.
It'd be weird kind of like learning your own songs.
Well,
right?
a lot of Headquarters is about learning how to be a studio.
Yeah.
Because they ultimately became too popular and they had to go on tour.
Right. So they had to be able to play.
To learn at that point.
Yeah.
But they were too busy making the TV show to really learn the way that they would have naturally learned by 8-hour practices and all sorts of, they were spending 10 hours filming and they were left with just 2 hours a day to practice how to play an instrument to an arena, essentially. That's hard.
Yeah. Luckily, the screaming was so loud from
hear
all
them.
the teenage girls, you couldn't hear them.
Right. So in 1966, their show premiered. It turns out to be a massive hit. And they instantly become household names. And their first album was released just before the TV show came out. Interesting tidbit about that is that it is them singing 100%. This is not a Milli Vanilli scenario where it's studio singers singing for these. I mean, it's legitimately the people, the 4 of them singing. Which is originally it was supposed to be Davy Jones who was going to be the lead singer, but when Mike got the opportunity to do some of the producing, it was like Mickey's voice is the unique one. He should be the sound of the band. And
what did that mean for Davy Jones at that point?
Well, which was interesting, when he was assigned the lead, the other 3 didn't care much for it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he was still the star of the show.
Right.
So
he was sort of still the face.
He was the face.
Yeah.
And he was the what the girls were screaming for.
But he didn't really write songs, right?
Not really.
I mean, did he play a little bit of drums on any of the studio albums?
A little bit. From time to time, he would. And there would be certainly times in concert where he would take Mickey's place so he could come out and sing, because being a drummer and a lead singer, it's difficult to balance that.
It's always impressive when you see it done well, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about the Eagles.
Yeah.
It's like Don Henley's probably the most successful, and Phil Collins were the most successful drummer turned lead singer.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Or I mean, this is a weird one, but Dave Grohl as well.
But he could play every instrument.
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. So, the show's a runaway success. And now...
And it won an Emmy. Right,
it wins the Emmy for their first season for best comedic or best series comedy series, beating out quite popular shows like I think the Beverly Hillbillies were up against that. I think Andy Griffith's show was still on at the time. So shows that had a run, and they beat them. Surprisingly, nobody thought that was it's like one of the greater upsets of award show history, that they won over these pre-established, already popular and great shows, right? So the other thing that ends up happening is that their albums start selling massively. They are one of the top selling bands of all time. At one point in time, I saw it in there. I may have to look at it. They've sold more than 75 million records worldwide.
Wow. Making
them one of the biggest selling groups of all time with international hits, including Last Train to Clarksville, Pleasant Valley Sunday, Daydream Believer, and I'm a Believer. 75 million albums in the course of 50 years, of course. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at.
All right.
Their first album was number one for 1/4 of a year, for 13 weeks.
Wow.
Spent another like 60 some weeks, I think, in the Billboard Top 100 or something beyond that. So it's it became a point where their albums started to eclipse the TV show, and by the second season, NBC was seeing lower ratings while their albums continued to sell higher.
Yeah.
So it was a situation where NBC wasn't getting what they were getting out of it anymore. So they canceled the show. Shortly after, once they knew that the show was being canceled, basically, or at least when they were pretty sure the show was going away, they started making head. And we'll talk about that in pretty good detail coming up here. But
right.
What's most interesting musically from the Monkees is that you're right. By all intents and purposes, they were just singing a soundtrack to a show. They were not meant to be a real band ever. But pop culture had other plans for them, and they became really, really popular.
Yeah, and I'm always kind of impressed. We were talking about this before the watching Head. We were kind of talking about, I always kind of come to think about the Monkees as being this decade-long phenomenon in the 60s, right? Or even into the 70s. And it's not that way at all. I mean, what was their whole kind of like trajectory was over what, maybe about 2 years?
They had a total of 9 albums released from July of 66 until early 1970.
Yep.
They like around April 1970 maybe.
But I mean, they were really kind of their entire trajectory lasts from about July 1966 until the end of their series, which was March or May of 1968. Yeah.
And some would say it even died before then. Mm-hmm. Head came out.
Head was 68, but it was the end of 68.
It was the end of 68. Yeah. So
which was probably for the best.
Probably, yeah, because I mean it's a deconstruction. So
I think it plays better with a little distance away from their mania, I guess. If you will.
Yeah. So we talked about this before the movie too, which is, you think about like the Beatles would spend so much time on the road. How did they produce their 9 albums?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, they produced the same amount of albums. The Monkees had half the time to do it, but of course they didn't have to write all the songs.
I mean,
they
wrote very few songs. Yeah, I mean, right. They had
the writers were Peter and Mike.
Yeah.
As far as when they did get to write their own, a little bit later when they weren't shackled by the TV show, Mickey and Davey would write a few songs here and there.
But by the late 60s, 69. They don't have anything else going on.
They don't really have the juice anymore.
Right.
And they are they're kind of living out the popularity of being Saturday morning reruns at some point too.
Yeah.
So it's
it's interesting. There's psychologically it's kind of fascinating to me to a point where at that point nobody really gives a shit about the Monkees. It's been this 2 to 3 year run and ride that made some people some money and became a flash in the pan pop sensation, if you will. And then they are kind of like, well, we still like being a band, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and they wanted to keep
at this point in time
the Monkee name alive, right?
And at this point in time, they had become a band.
Yeah.
So musically, okay, if we want to talk about the pop sensation that was the Monkees, their trajectory matches essentially an almost identical, minus a TV show, rise and fall of the Spice Girls in the 90s.
Yeah.
Pre-manufactured. It was it was these people look good together. They can sing enough. Put them together. We'll just sell them. We'll sell that image and their different personalities that we assign them to. In about 18 months' time, the Spice Girls released 2 albums and a movie. And they made a whole bunch of money. And some of them are still pretty well famous to this day for various other things.
Sure.
So it's a similar arc.
And they both made a movie.
They both made a movie.
And they're both very self-referential.
And very deconstructive, too. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Hitting on points that were important to them. I mean, certainly Spice Girls had the whole girl power thing. Yeah. And they play that up in Spice Girls. Have you ever seen that movie?
Oh, yeah.
It is bonkers.
All right. So I worked at the General Cinema, the Quad.
Yeah.
When that movie came out. And I probably saw that movie like 4 or 5 times.
It is bonkers, man.
It is absolutely bonkers. I hated the Spice Girls, but
it's an interesting.
But I did have a thing for Posh and Baby Spice.
Gosh,
both of those two kind of did it for me in different ways. So yeah,
you and David Beckham are really tied in.
Yeah,
deep.
We are tied in deep.
That's an inside story.
He's got a tattoo of me. On his abdomen.
Yep, he sure does. You as a leprechaun, which is the weirdest thing ever.
Yes.
But it's amazing.
That's about the deepest inside joke you could tell.
Well, you and David Beckham are in the same things. I mean, it's as cuckoo as it is, it's an interesting movie.
Yeah.
And it, I mean, I was hoping that you'd at least find Head interesting.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Yeah, and I think you ended up actually quite liking it.
Yeah, I did a lot. In fact, I'm probably going to go after the Criterion Blu-ray that I found out exists. I liked it a lot. What's funny though is I think it plays better, to me, in the sequences of absurdity. I think.
Yes.
I didn't love the music. I really like the theme song. What is
Porpoise
it? The Porpoise song? Yeah, I really like that. I like the song that you mentioned.
As We Go Along?
Yeah, but I feel like even that song feels a little strange in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, some of these songs were also, I think, some of them may have been leftovers that might have been meant to be part of an earlier time, or the only song that I believe was like actually specifically written for the movie was their parody of their theme song called Diddy Diego.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was written by Bob Rafelson and Jack Nicholson specifically to kind of, hey, by the way, we know we're fake. We know we're selling you a fantasy that you've taken for real.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and yeah, we got rich off of it. You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's right. The music is there specifically because it had to be.
Yeah.
You know, they could have had other songs in that from previous albums if they really wanted to. And
well, it's an odd movie because it has got a lot of that 60s counterculture. You know, the like you said, the Hollywood New Wave, that Jack Nicholson, Dennis Hopper, Bob Rafelson. You know, I think all those movies kind of exist in their own universe. I like The Trip, you know, and Easy Rider and all of that stuff. They all kind of just sit in this 3 or 4 or 5 year microcosm of time, right?
Yep.
And there's a huge element of that in this. I think seeing this now and understanding its pedigree, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It is right in the mix of that.
Yeah, and it skewers a lot of things. It skewers the idea of popularity. It skewers the idea of celebrity, show business in general. What people think of different generations.
Yeah.
Like, I think they are just as much poking fun, not only at how the older generation looks at younger people, but also how younger people look at the other generation too.
I think
there's stuff about religion in there. There's stuff about capitalism. You know, there's all sorts of different things that it has stuff to say because it was a very confusing time.
right.
Interestingly, that 50 years later, we're in another kind of confusing time.
It's also yeah, it's it's a confusing movie. It's so stream of consciousness. It's very much like dream logic. While I'm watching it, I'm thinking, I wonder if David Lynch liked this movie. I know he's seen this movie. It feels Lynchian at times, with its dream logic, and then I also got really strong feelings that Terry Gilliam has to love this movie. Like it's very pre Monty Python in a lot of ways.
Considering the amount of people that the Monkees ended up becoming friends with, all those people are probably friends of theirs.
Yeah. I have to be.
Yeah.
I guess if I had to explain this movie to someone, I would tell them it's like a combination of David Lynch's dream logic, Easy Rider / The Trip, that sort of counterculture vibe, and
but also play it as 4 or 5 episodes of the Monkees,
right? And that's where the Monty Python comes
right.
in. Yeah, that satire,
right?
That sort of the absurd,
right?
Right. Yeah,
it is really written in terms of the logic of their TV show.
Yeah,
which is interesting because the first time I saw it, I didn't dislike it, but I was like, this is very different than what I just watched. And for the longest time, I didn't have anything but the soundtrack. So there are cuts, there's audio from the movie placed into Jack Nicholson cobbled together a soundtrack from only the 6 songs that they had.
Oh wow.
So he took pieces from the movie, from the audio,
yep,
and rearranged it. It's a whole different entity.
So it's kind of like a Monty Python album.
Kind of. But like when you listen to it without context, you understand there are ideas there. When you know what the context is, it's interesting again on a different level. It's a whole different beast, and they should be treated as 2 different entities.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is very different for a soundtrack.
Yep.
Also, maybe one of the first kind of soundtracks of its kind, really. You could say, well, the Beatles had 2 movies prior to this, and they also had Yellow Submarine. They all had soundtrack, but they're not. They are soundtracks in name only, because only the first side of the album is the soundtrack. The other side is the other songs.
Yeah, and the use of music in a Beatles movie and it reminds me a lot of how the Monkees used music in the TV show.
Right.
It's sort of like very playful, cut into a madcap scene of some sort.
And it usually plays to whatever it is that they're doing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. This was totally different. When the music came in, it was like, okay, we're going to have like this really sort of abstract 3-minute music video.
Yeah.
That's kind of how they use it. And they use it to essentially bridge the movie into
it cuts
different
up
acts.
because each Monkee gets their own opportunity to shine.
Yeah.
And do something. And the song that individual Monkee sings is either before or after their moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it is meant to say, okay, song now ends this story and we go back to the next one. Mm-hmm. It probably does not come as any surprise to you that I'm reading from the production notes here on Wikipedia. The storylines and peak moments of the film came from a weekend visit in Ojai, California resort where the Monkees, Rafelson, and Nicholson brainstormed into a tape recorder reportedly with the aid of a quantity of marijuana.
Oh, I was going to say if it wasn't marijuana, there was a stack of LSD blotter.
Oh, yeah. Jack Nicholson then took the tapes and used them as the basis for his screenplay, which, according to Rafelson, he structured while under the influence of LSD. Interestingly enough, though, also, when the band learned that they would not be allowed to direct themselves or to receive screenwriting credit, Dolenz, Jones, and Nesmith staged a one-day walkout, leaving Torque as the only Monkee on the set the first day.
It would be Torque.
Yep. The strike ended after the first day when, to mollify the Monkees, the studio agreed to a larger percentage share of the film's net for the group. But the incident damaged the Monkees' relationship with Rafelson and Bert Schneider, the original producers, and would effectively end their professional relationship together.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of unfortunate because Rafelson and Schneider really stuck up for them. Their woes musically came from the music director that was kind of tasked with soundtracking the TV show and taking music that they could record and whatever they could get the 4 actors to do. Mm-hmm. His name was Don Kirshner, and he was the primary strife in the whole scenario, and he ultimately had to be forcibly removed from working with the production and with the Monkees during, I think, in between the first and second season, maybe, or the second and third album or something like that. But he would do all sorts of really dickheaded things, like he would make decisions on what singles would be released, ignoring any input from the band or from the producers that were working with them. He would, and the reason why he would give, it's like, well, I got both music and a TV show to sell, so
yeah,
tough. Now, granted, some of those decisions probably not a bad idea, but a lot of them were bad ideas. Or at least should have at least gone to the group and to Rafelson and Schneider. And it's like, well, what do you think? Because they could put whatever songs from their album that they wanted to into the TV show, but to sell the group and sell the music and the albums and the singles and whatnot, Schneider almost took that entirely upon himself. At one point in time, when the band kept pushing to be a band and to record in the studio as themselves, he ended up packing up the in-studio recording stuff and the band that was doing the recording and moved it from LA to New York.
Oh, wow.
So that they would never be a part of it until they were asked to sing.
Huh.
That doesn't go over well,
right,
when you have a fictional band, but a band nonetheless, thinking they have some control over their image and their own sound. Does not go over well at all. So that's a lot of their rise and fall, was that, it's like, in a way, yes, their music began outselling the TV show, but without the TV show, their music sales collapsed. But without the music, the TV show wouldn't have worked. it was a house of cards, really, is what was going on there.
Well, I think in a lot of ways, yeah, you're right. It was a house of cards, but it was also a perfect storm.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it couldn't. It was lightning in a bottle. I mean, what other metaphors, right? That's exactly what it was. And when that happens, you have no hope of sustaining it.
No,
it's not going to happen.
It's not, and it's built on the idea that kids from the age of 8 to 18 would continue to like what you're doing,
right?
And their parents continuing to buy what you want from them. And the more they started becoming more self-expressive, the less likely the parents are going to like what they hear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's understood. I mean, it's different now listening, even in the 80s, it was different listening to some of those more psychedelic songs that they did later in the TV show era, because by then you're so used to the other psychedelic music that had come out contemporarily with them. So it's a whole, it had to be an interesting ride.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was just trying to figure it out where I became a Monkees fan, and I'm gonna guess it was right around 1986.
Yes,
because that is when the album "Then and Now: The Best of the Monkees" came out. It was sort of a reunion of sorts for them, wasn't it?
It was their 20th anniversary. It was when MTV brought them back.
And they wrote a couple new songs for that album, which were actually pretty good.
Yeah, that was Then, This Is Now.
And anytime, any place, anywhere. Yeah. And the show was in syndication. I can never remember if it was on Nickelodeon.
It was it was on MTV for a couple of years.
Oh, was it?
And then they moved
think I caught it on MTV.
And then they moved it to. And then it went to Nickelodeon.
I think it was Nickelodeon. But I remember it coming on in the afternoons, though. I remember seeing the afternoons almost like with the Brady Bunch or something.
Yeah, they were kind of a perfect combo. So that kind of brings us up to where I also came in. So in 1986, they showed every episode of the Monkees back to back to back on MTV over the course of a weekend. And it's, for my mom and for my mom who liked the earlier Beatles stuff, she very much liked the Monkees.
Very much my dad. Yep.
Yes. And my brothers grew up with them in syndication in Saturday morning TV in the early 70s.
Yep.
This is also a perfect storm. I'm, 9 years old at the time. I am all in for this live action cartoon show.
Yeah.
That has catchy music, that has people that you like. It's
that was written basically for your demographic 20 years ago. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I had a sensibility of the Beatles and other, music that my mom and my brothers were listening to when, long before I came along. So I'm all in. Well, Rhino Records.
Yep.
They go all in, re-release all the albums as part of the 20th anniversary. We bought them all.
Yep.
And I have some, I'm pointing to them right now.
Yeah.
They all had the sticker on it that was, talking about celebrating the 20th anniversary. And that's nostalgia like none other for me, really. In August 1st, 1986, there was a 20th anniversary convention in Philadelphia. Me, my three brothers, and my mom went.
Wow, really?
It was my first ever convention.
Holy shit. No shit.
Yeah.
First ever con was a Monkees convention.
All Peter, Mickey, and Davey were there.
Wow. Did they perform at all?
There was a concert that night. I don't think we had tickets for that. I think it sold out. But I remember going to the Liberty Bell, that was like the day before the convention started. I think we stayed in the hotel that the convention was in.
That's so cool.
My one souvenir from it that I bought was a greatest hits that was released in Europe that was like 16 or 20 songs on the album. I have that over there in my cabinet. I think it was a German release or something. But that was my one big that and the T-shirt or something, I think.
Yeah.
So, it's like my single mom took 4 boys.
That's wow.
12 hours away to Philadelphia to this 3-day convention.
Wow. You probably didn't go on too many vacations like that, I would imagine.
No, not quite like that. A couple of years before that, we went to Montana, so my 2 of my brothers could take a look at Montana State University.
Oh, cool.
Where they ended up becoming friends with Justin Fonda, who is Bridget Fonda's brother.
Oh, really?
They actually hung out at Peter Fonda's ranch at one point.
Yeah, don't they have some connection to Ted Turner, right? Too. He's got a ranch out there.
Probably for Jane.
Yeah, for Jane. Yeah.
Because Jane and Peter, I think, are brother and sister. I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but anyway, they got to hang out with Peter Fonda. I think they probably smoked some really good pot out there. But anyway, 1 week later, August 8th was my first ever concert. There was a concert in Riverbend, Cincinnati, Ohio. Riverbend was the name of the place.
Yep.
It's actually still there. And they were performing with Gary Puckett and Union Gap, the Grassroots, Herman's Hermits, and it's going to drive me nuts. There was the Turtles.
So I was going to say it's got to be the Turtles.
It was the Turtles.
The
and
Turtles.
Then the Monkees were
the Turtles and Herman's Hermits still members of those bands still tour together today. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it must have been an all day or at least a half a day experience. But we went to that too. And then about a month later, Head came out on VHS. So, for a little while, it's like you like I was saying, you had this context for something that you have no idea what they're talking about. And then when you finally pair it, it's like, this is weird, man, but it's enlightening to their plight.
Yeah. Well, it's no surprise to me that I'd never seen Head. Like, I grew up with the Monkees. And I liked their music up to what I was exposed to, right? Which is usually the stuff that people think of when I think of the Monkees, like the really popular stuff.
The first 5 albums and the TV show. Yeah.
And my dad, he didn't really listen to anything after probably, I'm thinking Beatles wise, probably Rubber Soul was the line in the sand for him.
Yeah, because Revolver came next and everything was changed.
So, so I had to discover all those late Beatles albums on my own, but I never did the same for the Monkees.
It was a different thing.
I never watched Head, and I think I'd always been maybe told it was just not very good, or it was whatever.
I mean, for the longest time, it was kind of regarded as the weirdo thing that they did. It really wasn't until the last 25 years or so that they got a sincere critical reevaluation.
Yeah.
So I mean, really, it's really hard to describe what Head is.
Yes.
There are vignettes. There are vignettes that talk about war. There's vignettes that talk about advertising that's almost propaganda with the Coke machine and stuff like that. And rebelling against stuff like that. Fucking blowing that
fridge up. Yeah.
Blowing that motherfucking Coke machine up. Things go better with Coca-Cola, people. But anyway, no, there's a lot. I mean, it's like, I mean, you can explain an episode of the Monkees. We could talk about the 2 episodes we watched before that pretty succinctly.
Yeah.
We could talk about pieces of Head pretty succinctly. To talk about it as a 86-minute movie is impossible.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is somebody described it in some of the quick things I read after watching it. Somebody described it as kind of shedding their young boy appeal while also trying to appeal to the counterculture movement.
Yeah.
And their contemporaries, basically, who they perceived as contemporaries, and both things failed. Well, they were able to shed their fans and not gain new ones. Yeah, essentially. So it was another sort of perfect failure for them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it's easier for them to do that today in retrospect than it would have been for them to do it 50 years ago. A lot of what this movie and a lot of their history is, if you embed it within the 60s, there's a time of counterculture and the other normal, quote unquote, culture rebelling against that. And you hit a brick wall where either you're the Beatles and you still can survive because it's only idiots in the South that are burning your albums, or you die. And for the Monkees, they never could get over the more, and the reason why I wanted to bring up the fact that you're a music snob is that was their main enemy. It wasn't them growing up and changing. It wasn't their fans growing up and changing. It was as much as media pushed them to heights, it also pushed them down and basically kicked them in the nuts at the same time. Because as more popular they became, their detractors got louder and louder and saying they should not be.
They're frauds.
They're frauds.
Yeah, you're right.
And part of that actually is interesting. When their first album was released, there is no liner notes that credit the in-studio musicians.
Oh, wow.
And Mike Nesmith was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? You are killing us."
Yeah.
Because the moment they see, and as much as he was, screaming and yelling and punching holes, like literally punching a hole in the wall over whether or not they are playing their own instruments on stage, he was the first one to recognize, you're going to doom us because you're going too far selling that fantasy. It would be like saying, well, it's like saying there is no William Shatner, there is only Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
You sell that fantasy, which, by the way, a lot of Trekkies fell into anyway, that you're killing the legitimacy of the person who actually is doing what's there. And you're killing, you're perpetuating a fantasy and killing it at the same time. It's weird.
Yeah, because the problem is, people don't want, I guess people don't want to be lied to. They want to be tricked. Right.
Yeah. And
I think when you do that, when you don't give the proper credit, you're not coming out and announcing it in publicity that this is not a real band, but the clues should be there. And if somebody can follow the clues and figure that out for themselves, they're going to have a much better time accepting that.
Which I think is why they became so much more famous 20 years later than they were in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why, they can sell out a stadium, or not a stadium, but a venue 50 years on, is that, one, we know they're now playing their music. Yeah. But it's the songs that we all knew were a part of the fantasy. It's the difference
between like a joke and a hoax, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the TV show, there was, I mean, they're not, the TV show is not realistic enough for you to really honestly believe that they are not actors playing a part.
Right.
There's no situation in the TV show that's realistic enough. Again, it is a live action animated cartoon, basically.
Yeah.
I've always thought of it like that. And I think that's why it always appealed to my sensibilities, because sometimes things that go on inside my head look an awful lot like a Monkees episode.
Yeah.
Like sped up motion, everything, with a catchy tune behind it,
nice.
Or whatever. But no, I mean, and that's only partially true. I always joke that like the things I see in my head are oftentimes cartoons, but they are probably more accurately like an episode of the Monkees.
But it makes me feel like too, this movie was being made when they were still enjoying success, right?
Yes, because the movie came out later than they expected. So,
but it was being made.
It was being made at the time that their show was still on the air, and they were selling copies of their fourth and fifth album.
So you wonder a little bit, at least I do, about Nicholson and Company's actual intentions with Head. Like to me, this feels like, and I think everyone would agree in hindsight, that it's very much a parody
Yes.
of their existing image at the time it was being made.
Yeah.
So you don't do that unless you're trying to make satire.
Right. And I think that they were satisfied at
And
that
that's
time.
a totally different direction
Right.
for a PR machine
Yes.
built on making money.
Yes.
So to me, I feel like there were smart people involved who, like Nicholson probably, was like, this thing is ending.
Yeah.
Let's put the final exclamation point on this joke with this movie.
And maybe from that we can maybe you guys can launch off
Who
into
knows?
something other.
Right. I mean, I think
I mean, maybe there could have been more movies or whatever. I mean, or a different network would have picked up a new version of the TV show or something.
yeah. I don't think that anyone involved should have been surprised that this failed, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a little too early for successful counterculture. It's a year before Easy Rider.
Yeah. And when I say failed, I don't mean it was unsuccessful in what it sought out to do. It just failed commercially.
Exactly.
And I think they told a really fucking funny joke and no one got it for 20 years.
Yeah. Or at least by the time they did get it, maybe by the early to mid 70s because here's the thing. It's like Don Kirshner didn't end producing music for a fake band. He went on to produce music for a band called the Archies.
Oh, yeah.
That was a fucking literal cartoon.
Yeah.
So and later in the 70s, once you get into a little bit higher produced stuff, particularly with like disco and stuff, suddenly you do have a different trajectory of singers and dancers, not instrument performers.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So by the time people,
so much of popular music today is built around that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even some well-respected acts are heavily produced.
Yes.
For whoever wants to make a chagrin out of that.
Well,
I don't care much for it, but that's okay.
Do you have like the celebrity producer now? Back in this time, who was like a celebrity producer? Phil Spector?
Right.
Was there anybody else that was a celebrity producer?
Not really.
No, but you have them now.
I mean, because by the time you get to the early 90s, you have somebody like Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
And
yep.
A lot of rock and roll acts worked with Rick Rubin.
Well, and a lot of former musicians in rock bands became producers as well. You think of like Rick Ocasek, right?
Yeah. Or what's the guy from the Eurythmics?
Oh shit,
Dave. Is it Dave Thomas?
I don't have it. Sorry, it's not my lexicon.
Dave Stewart.
There you go.
Dave Stewart. He was just, I don't know how much he produced, but he certainly was a guy coming in to the studio because you respected his musical ear and his talent.
Yep.
Tom Petty used him,
I think probably the real soul popular, producers, I guess celebrity producers would have come out of like Motown and things like that.
Absolutely.
That's
Quincy Jones.
Yeah. That's kind of really, I think, what kind of made a producer someone who could be recognized in the public spotlight. They weren't just a nerd behind the
right.
album.
I mean, when Quincy Jones can come in and say, I can not only produce you a hit, I've already written for it, and I've already got you both the lyrics and the music.
Yeah.
And he's pretty good. He actually had a hit TV theme song.
Huh. Really? Which one?
Ironside.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ironside, man. Did they try to make a movie of that? Or did they make a movie of that?
They made a new TV show.
Oh, it's a TV show.
And it didn't do very well.
Ooh, it looked bad. I don't know why they're trying to do that with so many of these like 70s and 80s TV shows.
Because nostalgia sells, man.
But some of them, so shows were not very good. Like back then, they weren't very good. Can anybody really truthfully tell me that they could watch, I don't know, 10 episodes of Miami Vice in a row? Like,
but you could watch 10 episodes of Miami Vice.
No one would fucking binge Miami Vice, you know?
No.
I mean, TV was different then.
Right. I mean, like,
so they're almost trying to take like what was popular about a TV show 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, and infuse it with today's like serial storytelling, and it doesn't fucking work.
Funny you mentioned that, because in 1987, the new Monkees came out,
Aha.
and that was garbage. That was flat out garbage. But it was the Monkees with 80s sensibility.
Yeah.
Doesn't really work.
Yeah.
There is a in 1997, the Monkees did a special for ABC. It was an hour-long special.
What year was it again?
97.
97.
And what they did
So
was
at the end of grunge, basically.
because they make jokes about how they're not edgy enough
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. But they are. It's also the joke that their show never ended. So
That's
make
funny.
Yeah, so they're still living together in the same pad.
Yeah.
They're still doing the same thing. The people are coming up to them and asking them about, doing like, what if I said this? Like to give them a plot line to follow.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we did that in 1970. And so there are jokes like that. I mean, it's a little bizarre because it's a weird mix of 90s.
Did they bring back the laugh track?
No. Which might actually make that a little weird.
It might, yeah.
So it's a weird combination of 90s older people in their 50s now, with sensibilities from the 60s, but also recognizing that they're old and they're in a different time.
Would that go like maybe 6 episodes?
They only did one
it was a special. It was a special.
Right. And it was the last time and the only time since Head, or actually since, we'll just say Head. 33 revolutions per monkey is 33 and a third revolutions per monkey is terrible. I watched that last night for the first time. I'm glad I held off this long. It's terrible. But it was the first time since then that all 4 of them were
together. Okay.
Right. In a TV element.
Okay. Was that the last time? When did Davy Jones die?
2011 or 12.
Okay, so it's not that long ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was shortly after their 45th anniversary tour or something. Yeah, so it's they have a wonderful sense of humor about themselves and about, because like that special, at one point in time they reference that, oh yeah, that was episode 791 or whatever. It was, and at one point even like they break the fourth wall and Mickey turns to the camera. It's like, well, you thought that, it's like, what do you think happens to TV shows after they're canceled? They keep going. It's like it's that perfect idea of what everybody thinks a finale should be, is that it doesn't ever just end. It's just there's no more stories for us to know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
their lives continue.
Their lives continue beyond
right.
the lights being shut off. You know?
Yeah.
It's like Cheers still operates even though Sam and Carla are the only ones left there.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so, and that's a show that CBS owns that I'm terrified they're bringing back sometime soon.
Oh, that'll happen.
I will punch CBS in the fucking eye.
That's gonna happen.
I know it is.
Some fucking turd, junior executive is gonna be like, let's bring back Cheers.
It's gonna be fucking Chuck Lorre. We all know it. And they're all gonna be. I'm sorry, but dude, Sheldon Cooper, you need help. You don't need your friends. You need help.
Oh, Cheers. You know what it will be, Jeff? It won't be a bar. It will be a brewery.
Yes.
It'll be a bunch of beardo brewers. Yep. That's what it would be.
All right, I'm
going to start writing a treatment right now because somebody needs to make this movie. They don't need to make it, but it might make me money. Don't even bother trying to steal this. I've already got the treatment mailed to myself in a sealed envelope.
The fact that you're listening to this, it's already copyrighted 2018.
That's true.
I don't want anything part. If you do this, this show is over.
Joe, end me. Or Jeff. All right, I'm losing my mind a little bit. Let's get back on track.
Yeah, so, but anyway, I mean, I think music snobbery at the time would say, like you said, they are tricking people. They're not a joke.
Right.
And
I think that people are okay with being tricked. They're being lied to.
They're being lied to.
Yeah.
And at the time, our generation would have probably looked at it as just noise.
Yeah.
We would have been like, wow, it's not Frank Sinatra or whatever. You know,
right.
That's who we would have been then. I think why I was curious what you thought is that you came into it at a different zeitgeist of it.
Yeah.
You aren't in the middle of hearing about how they're lying to people or they're tricking people or they're fake or they're no talent. Because I mean, honestly, other than the fact that they were on TV as a band, that they would not release immediately the names of the people who did play on the album. Really, how much different are they from a Frank Sinatra or an Elvis Presley who didn't write their own songs,
Right.
who sang, who just sang
And had charisma.
and had charisma?
Yeah.
I would argue that each one of these four guys had charisma.
Yep.
They had a TV show about their charisma.
And what's interesting too is that they're truly the sum of their parts.
Yeah.
Is what is charismatic about them. Like, I know that Davy Jones was sort of the heartthrob for the teen girls, but he to me is the least interesting character in the Beatles. Those other guys, I
mean
think,
the Monkees? You said the Beatles.
Jesus Christ, I am losing my mind. In the Monkees, yes.
I had to correct that because there's no way I can edit that in post. There's no way I can fix that. Yeah.
It was like when on my way over here, I heard someone on the College Game Day make a blatant error, and nobody corrected him. It drove me crazy.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I can't fix it in post. I mean, I guess I could have tried to find you saying the word monkey and then drop it in.
You could have been like, "Hey, just say the word monkey at the end of this episode," and then you just plop that in.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe you should just do that now.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. We've got charisma here on this show.
We're trying to make self-referential jokes now.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is like
we're moving in fast motion.
We can edit our own head style version of this episode and just tell it completely out of order.
Yeah.
And in stream of consciousness.
Let's drop in.
Let's face it, some of this segment right now in particular is very stream of consciousness.
Exactly. Let's go ahead and just drop in Last Train to Clarksville here.
Okay.
Take the last train to Clarksville and I'll meet you at the station. You can be here by 4:30 cause I've made your reservation. Don't be slow. No, no, no. No, no, no. Cause I'm leaving in the morning and I must see you again. We'll have one more night together till the morning brings my train and I must go. No, no, no. No, no, no. And I don't know if I'm ever coming home.
Wow, that sure was a crazy adventure we just went on.
Crazy.
Huh?
We were in a box. And
I know. It was like
trapped.
Yeah, and then I ran super fast, and you were tied to the train rack.
We went out stage left, came back stage right.
I know.
It was crazy.
And then you were tied to train tracks, and I had to beat like a guy with a big curly mustache and a top hat.
Rescue me.
Yeah,
And then
That was
suddenly we were in a
crazy.
boxing ring.
I know.
Fighting
It was
Sonny
crazy.
Liston. Nuts.
crazy. We sure do have fun here.
I want to talk about my favorite joke in this movie.
Go for it.
It's so dumb, but it killed me. It's there's this whole sequence with Mickey where he's stranded in the desert, and it's the whole bit with the Coke machine and blowing that up and the anti-commercialism kind of aspect. It's that in comedy there, but there's this moment where it's playing a little bit off of Lawrence of Arabia. This whole sequence is with the sand dunes and this Arabian horse rider, you know, that's riding up on Mickey, and he rides up on Mickey. And he's about 5 feet away, and he goes psst, and so Mickey kind of leans in, and the rider comes in close, and he goes psst, and they subtitled psst,
It just takes off.
and it just takes off.
And Mickey's like, what?
I absolutely adored that joke.
My favorite part of this is actually in the war part, because that is really seems like something they would have done on the TV show, where they would have actually dropped them into a fucking war.
Yeah.
Vietnam in particular. There's a lot of Vietnam imagery in this. That's kind of it's played against popularity. So it's like you see somebody get fucking shot in the head, like the famous footage of the Viet Cong guy assassinating the other,
which is so jarring.
But then it's played against the vapid sense of screaming for popularity and Western culture being kind of separated from the horrors of the world.
Yeah.
And it's that's saying something, but that's not my favorite part. I'm not a fucking psychopath. My favorite part is the war segment where they're all in this trench. And of course, Davey can't see out of the trench because he's too short. And so Mickey's like, here's my helmet, go, just stand on this. It's a drag to wear this. And of course he bumps his head. He's talking about how like, why don't you just say shot in the arm or shot in the leg? Why do you have to say shot in the head when Peter's like warning him he should wear his helmet? It's funny, the entire movie, Peter's played as the smart one. In the entire TV series, he was the dumb one.
Right. Which
they even make
a joke about that. Yeah. Which I thought was funny when you mentioned that Peter was the only one that stayed behind.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, oh, Peter's always been the dummy.
Yeah. But he's probably actually legitimately the smartest guy of the four. But anyway, so Mike is like the lieutenant or whatever, or the major that's like in charge of them. And he's like, somebody needs to go and get, go get ammunition. And Peter's like, oh, I'll go. And Mike's reaction of just saying, see that you do.
Yes.
It's just like his hard boiled, like that
war general.
Me.
He's funny.
It just kills me how deadpan he can be.
Mike is I think the funniest monkey because of that. He's so wry, like you said. He's got
he plays to adults better, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Because I made the comment that my favorite monkey when I was a kid was Mickey
because he plays
sort
the
of
kids.
A goofball. Yeah. And then and now Mike is my favorite now.
Right.
Yeah.
So the other joke that you liked.
Yeah, it was phenomenal.
Right after the Peter saying, it's like, Mickey, I'm always the dummy. So there's a whole boxing fight where Davey is the boxer. He's fighting Sonny Liston. Mike is a gangster. And it looks like Mickey's kind of like just the nerd numbers cruncher.
Yeah.
Who's like trying to tell Davey to stay down so that they can pay out. And Mike, of course,
because the money says that he should, right?
He has to stay out,
right? Which doesn't make any sense,
right? But whatever. They're basically throwing the fight, which was the plot of a previous episode anyway, where it's like basically they set Davey up to be like a fake champ, like a paper tiger.
Oh,
really.
Which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
In context of the show. Yeah.
Right. And so Mickey, like when Davey would keep getting up, and like his girlfriend, who's Annette Funicello, tells him to stay down and all of this, and and so Mickey goes nuts and goes into the ring and starts punching everybody out.
He knocks out Sonny Liston.
Yeah.
He knocks out the referee.
Yeah. Well,
he knocks out Davy Jones.
Yeah, he knocks out the referee by knocking out Sonny Liston. He falls onto the ring. And then,
of course, Annette Funicello is out there. She's Annette Funicello?
She's not out there. It's Mike's gangster girlfriend, who I think was actually a famous burlesque dancer in LA.
She comes into the ring.
She comes into the ring and like Jason's like, oh my god, is he gonna punch her too? But then he takes her by the arm
around her,
and he's like
walks with her over to the ropes.
Yeah, and then he like clubs her.
So I love that because I told Geoff that just is perfect because you expect something to happen that if happened probably wouldn't have been that funny, but
would have been funny in context that it's like he even knocks out the girl.
He even knocks out the girl,
right.
Whatever.
He's completely and totally lost.
But they know the writing is smart enough to know like that's what you're going to expect to happen. So they subvert that. They take your attention away from it, and then it happens. Right. Like that is just good comedy.
Yeah. Davey has a good facial expression. First of all, his featured song, Daddy Song, is what it's called. Super dark song. It's played super like super happy and joyful. It's a dark fucking. It's about a guy leaving his kid.
Yeah.
Most of the Monkey songs are a hell of a lot darker than they actually sound, which is a point they actually made in the Wikipedia article when they were talking about the music of the almost every song in this movie is either rebelling against their image or telling a sad story.
Yeah.
Or being overly realistic about something.
There's a moment where Peter says, I think it was Peter who says, nobody ever lends money to a man with a sense of humor.
Right.
And they really hammer that with text on screen. and I thought about that and I was like, what are they trying to say there? And to me, it almost feels like, maybe there's a perception that funny people are easy targets. Maybe there's a perception, though, that they want to tell a different type of humor. Well, they want to be funny in a different way.
I take it,
and the kid connects.
Well, it could be that
they're having trouble connecting.
I thought of it like that because I made 4 pages of fucking.
Yeah, you did.
Because I watched this movie twice recently, today and then a couple of weeks ago, and I just went to town on the notes. And I took it, and when I really kind of thought about it, which this is again a very late 60s thing. Sometimes things have multiple meanings. And like ask 5 film professors what they think the end of 2001 is about. You might get 5 different answers.
Sure.
And that's the purpose of it. But in that,
I heard a wild theory on that recently, actually.
We'll talk about that afterwards. Because that's a movie I think we should talk about at some point. But anyway, I was thinking about that line. I kind of think of it like they were played for the fool on TV, and maybe specifically Peter was, and he was never going to shake that persona that he had on TV, and therefore he was never going to be taken seriously. You're typically taken seriously as an adult when somebody will lend you money and they expect you to pay it back. Yeah,
I think that in a roundabout way, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that may be. Yeah, I mean, more directly, it's because it's Peter espousing all of the...
And more than anyone in this movie, he's a different character.
He's a completely different character.
Yeah.
But tying to that, one of my favorite, it's the little thing. Again, it's the little things.
Yeah.
I harp on this constantly. It's the little thing. When he's telling the guys after he tried to keep them from getting trapped inside the box, that's a pretty heavy-handed metaphor, but it's really important to think of in multiple different ways. They are captives of the boob tube. Their personalities on TV followed them forever. At one point, you see them in a fishbowl, literally in a fishbowl.
Yeah.
And here they're trapped inside this box that they can't break out of. And Peter's telling them all of this, the stuff that he learned from a Swami in a fucking sauna.
which is beautiful. The digs they make on the Beatles in this movie are tremendous, and that's a great one. Yeah.
So, and the big moral of the story of what the Swami was telling Peter was that why should you listen to him? Because he knows nothing. And he repeats everything he learned from that Swami back to the other 3 monkeys. Yeah. And when he gets to the point when he says, but why should you listen to me? For I know nothing. There is a look that Davey gives of realization that he's just been fed a bunch of bullshit. Yeah. And he loses it and busts out of the box.
He's like, you want to know how to get out of this box? This is how you get out of this box. And he punches and kicks the door down.
But the look of realization that he just got lied to, essentially, or how he felt. And it's like, we're inside this box. We're listening to him who knows nothing. It goes nuts.
Well, and it's interesting because you think of the counterculture scene as sort of a rebellion, right? They're not really buying into a lot of that bullshit anymore. They're kind of like, you know what? We're on this precipice of we gave peace a chance, right? But now, we kind of need to take charge.
Right. It's our turn to lead.
Yeah.
Which every generation has that. And sometimes generations fumble it. Sometimes they try to hold later generations down, which I think is what's kind of going on now.
Absolutely. It's what's happening now.
And it's, because, I kind of feel like our generation kind of fumbled the ball.
Our generation was small.
Right, but when it was our turn to lead, we kind of
we punted it a little bit. What we did was we built fucking websites. Yeah. I mean, our generation is the tech generation,
right.
Really, and we ushered in the information age, if you want to be honest about it,
and the misinformation age.
Yes, that too.
Let's get real hippie here for a second. I know I'm not buying into it. There was one moment where there was like a fucking hippie freak out happening in this movie, and I'm like, I don't want to talk to any of these people.
That was the
and
trip.
Neither does Mike.
That was like the trip. The whole like movie, The Trip is 90 minutes of that.
Yeah, which is interesting and can be done.
Yes.
But I would tend to find myself. Long story short, Mike gets basically kidnapped for a surprise birthday party, and it's a hippie freak out, and he is having none of it.
It pays off really well. Yeah, it's fucking funny.
and I am in that boat. I would be like, no, you don't.
It's like I'm in my pajamas.
Yeah. You invite me to the party. Don't kidnap me.
Maybe there was something else I would want to do. Maybe I don't want to do anything at all.
Yeah. And the same thing goes for Christmas.
Yeah. And everybody gasps, and then they give them like a joyous round of applause. Yeah.
Well, the girl screams again, and it just brings it right back to it's just everything's a joke.
Yeah.
Everything's just whatever. It doesn't matter. Nothing important that you have to say means fucking anything.
Yep.
So life sucks, basically.
It is a bit nihilistic, this movie.
It is a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
This is a movie that I can't recommend to everybody. This is
a movie I'm going to watch a fucking lot. That I'm really kind of sad that I've gone almost 40 years without it being in my life.
Well, now you got the next 40 years with it in your life.
I really liked it.
It's a very good movie, but if you know nothing about the Monkees, if you don't like the Monkees, or if you don't know, if you know a lot about the Monkees, you will get something out of this. Even if you've never seen all of the TV shows or never seen any of their TV shows, you'll get something out of it if you understand the genre that they were.
Yeah.
Because they were kind of a genre of their own. And when you really get down to it, you and I knew we could talk about this movie because I knew you had at least an appreciation, if not directly for the Monkees, for my appreciation of the Monkees. Mm-hmm. This was, I felt, much less of a chance than two previous movies that we talked about that did not go over well. Yellow Submarine and Xanadu.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the perfect way to not talk about another musical for a while.
Yeah. Well, so that's interesting because I think the next one should be Me. And I know exactly what it's going to be. And it's going to be Pink Floyd's The Wall. We are going to watch the fuck out of that. And I'm glad you love it because I love that movie. Yeah.
We could watch it right now.
We could.
But we're not. Stay tuned.
Because it's interesting. That movie, to me, also, I think, uses more darker Terry Gilliam elements. Or I should say Terry Gilliam, I think, probably took a lot of his animation. And I have to look at the actual timeline of that. Terry Gilliam probably was before The Wall.
Oh, yeah. Because the movie The Wall was... The album was 79. The movie was 82.
Yeah. So that, to me, is interesting. And I honestly got a lot of... the darker vibes in Head made me think of The Wall, for sure.
Yeah,
and some of the commentary on stardom, and being like this, I know, bigger. People think you're more important than you are, right? And then letting that You can go either two ways with that.
Well,
it can cripple you because you know that you're not that person, or you can let it go straight to your head and become a megalomaniac.
Right. And in a way, that's how they use Victor Mature in this movie. So Victor Mature is kind of he was very, very popular in the 50s. Maybe in a little bit before.
Yeah, I didn't get any of those references.
He was in movies like The Robe. He was in a lot of other like those those big biblical productions. Mm-hmm. Those were star maker movies. And he was a big star. By the mid 60s, he retired from acting. He was in a Neil Simon play or movie where he played basically the same character he is here. A person who had been super famous and then was basically living off of his fame by just showing up and people knowing who he is. In a way, they're using him as that other side of, well, if the Monkees wanted to, they could just be what people want them to be, right, and they could live the rest of their lives.
And they literally get like almost destroyed by that in this movie. Like that, he turns into a giant.
Right, it's ego. He represents ego.
Yeah,
and I think they asked a famous person to play that. I don't think he is that way.
Right,
but I kind of liken him to the Troy McClure character on The Simpsons, where it's like, oh, you're gonna know me, but when I just show up,
right,
I might tell you that you know me from these things, but you know who that person is.
Yeah, and they even take a moment to show you him again, but as himself, who is unimpressed with himself.
He's unimpressed. Yeah. He's bored with his
own persona. Yeah,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, he's in, he's buying into what the movie's trying to say.
For sure. Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about the Monkees for almost as long as Head is. So I think, one last thing. What I always say is kind of the thesis of this movie is in Porpoise Song, which is the theme song to this movie, co-written by Carole King, who also wrote my favorite song, As We Go Along.
That blew my mind, by the way, that she wrote these songs.
But As We Go Along and Porpoise Song are my top two favorite Monkee songs. And when they played Porpoise Song in the 50th anniversary tour, the Stop Here, and when I saw them live, that I got tingles. That blew my freaking mind. But there's a line in that song that I feel like is kind of the thesis of what the Monkees were battling against. And that is the line, clicks, clacks, riding the backs of giraffes for laughs is all right for a while. Meaning it's okay to be the clown, but beyond that, you're a real person, and you have to kind of show that you're a real person. Mm-hmm. That whole song is about being who you are as opposed to your image, and being true to yourself and stuff like that. So anyway, I think that's a good way to wrap things up.
Absolutely.
Next week we've got one of my favorite horror movies.
Yes, mine as well, honestly.
We're gonna dip back in after just last week talking about Halloween. Mm-hmm. We're gonna dip back into the John Carpenter pool.
Yes.
With was it 94 or 95? One of those years. In the Mouth of Madness.
I think 95.
Yeah, because I remember going to see it in the theater when I was a senior in high school with my buddy Andy. It's a great, trippy, weird movie. It, in some ways, kind of plays into Head a little bit. Mm-hmm. Kind of interesting that we have November movies that kind of mirror each other a little bit.
Yeah, but it's also sort of a grab bag in a way.
It definitely plays into the idea of art and reality and celebrity and manipulation of of an image and
absolutely.
So anyway, we're going to talk about that next week. I'm excited.
Do we tell them what it was, or are we going to leave that as a surprise?
In the Mouth of Madness?
Okay.
Didn't I say that?
I don't know.
I don't
remember.
In the Mouth of Madness.
In the Mouth of Madness.
Sam Neill, Jürgen Prochnow.
Yes. Carpenter's classic.
Probably maybe his last classic.
That's probably true.
But we're excited to talk about that. If you are a fan of the Monkees, let us know.
Yeah.
Let us know what your favorite song is.
Yeah.
I suspect a lot of them are going to be one of the top hits. Daydream Believer, or I'm a Believer, or Last Train to Clarksville. Pleasant Valley Sunday, great song.
All
these songs, fucking fantastic.
We got through this entire episode. We didn't mention Neil Diamond until right now.
Right, because he had nothing to do with Head.
Right. But he wrote some other big songs.
He wrote a couple of their pretty big hits.
Really big hits.
I'm a Believer and A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You.
Yep.
So, yeah, Neil Diamond for the win.
There we go.
Probably launched the Monkees into near Hall of Fame status.
Uh-huh.
We haven't even talked about that. Long story short, some Monkees believe that they've been basically blacklisted for not being performers as well with with instruments. Some said we're just providing a soundtrack to a TV show that just happened to be famous.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it would be awesome
if they got into
if they got into
Rock
the
and Roll
Hall
of Fame.
Yeah, but
that probably won't happen.
Honestly, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't.
Also, when I was doing my research on that, finding out that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a for-profit company, not just a thing that the music industry has built, really, really changed my opinion. It's like they're never going to let them in.
It's always been a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's a joke.
It's whatever we can put on TV where there's a jam session at the end with everybody that people like.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a great honor, but it's probably no greater honor than winning Album of the Year Grammy. And even
Definitely not.
And even that is shaky.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway.
All right. Well,
so
then next week,
let us know if you like the Monkees. That'd be great to know. I want to connect with other Monkees fans. Don't connect though if you don't like them. Don't call me a stupid head.
You stupid guys like the Monkees. That'd be the nicest thing that somebody who heckled us would say
on the internet. Yeah. Absolutely. But you can, and to do that, you can always reach out to us on email at
filmseizure@gmail.com.
You can reach out to us on Facebook at Film Seizure, Gmail at Film Seizure. We're on the Instagrams.
And the Instagrams and the Twitters.
And the Twitters. But all of that stuff is at Film Seizure.
Film Seizure.
You can find us.
Put the words film and seizure back to back in that order with no spaces and you'll find us.
Pretty easily and quickly.
Yeah.
Of course, we have filmseizure.com, which is where you may be listening to this. You may be listening to it on SoundCloud. Either which way.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome. But until next week, I am Geoff Arbuckle.
I am Jason Oliver. And you have been listening to Film Seizure.